believe we have a caller from Pennsylvania called Mark. Are you there, Mark?
Are you there?
Hello?
Alan?
Yes.
You are, I hate to use the word hero. I don't use that lightly, and I'm using it for you. You're the man.
I'm the man, eh? Okay.
I have several questions, and I'll run through them real quick. Anyone who is knighted, would they be considered on the other team?
Yes.
So, for example, and this is really going to disappoint my wife, Elton John, who she loves so dearly, he's knighted.
Yeah.
Not good. And you're in the music industry, so you probably know a little bit more about him than most people do.
Yeah.
Ron Paul, is he delivered to us as a hero, as you talk about?
That may or may not be. The fact is, with Ron Paul, let's be honest, politics is a con game. We've been through this with Pat Buchanan and a whole bunch of David Duke, and they had a whole bunch before that. They always give you a hero, and the problem is the public's fault because they look for someone else to do all of this for them. That's the problem.
There's a website that has a quote from him in Congress praising the Vatican. And actually, that's what kind of, because I was a Ron Paul, for the first time I was going to vote in 22 years. I know you've never voted. And I was all excited about voting for Ron Paul, and I know this is going to bode well for the station we're listening to. But that kind of opened my eyes, and then there were a few other things that he's talked about. For example, he's denied that he has any links to the 9/11 Truth Movement, that sort of thing. So I think people should really look into that. Hopefully we're wrong about that. It would be nice to have someone who is so into doing the right thing. And also, isn't the word Constitution, the first three letters, con?
That's right. The con is the con. It means a lot of things in the old mystery religions. You'll find very important words come from C-O-N. And sure, it's a con. It is a con.
So, I mean, when they say that he's Mr. Constitution, that's not a good thing, is it?
It's a con of standing. In Masonry, Freemasonry, and the founding fathers were Freemasons, they talked about people in good standing, upright people. And so the Constitution really is the con of the standing. They did leave this prosperity to their offspring, but they were talking about themselves at the time. That was the big trick. The ordinary person had nothing to do, no inputs into the making of the Constitution, because Masonry at that time was set upon setting up a new type of feudal system and society that went all the way from Voltaire, who had his own township. He was a lord of the town. If you wanted to get married, you'd have to introduce your future wife to him for the okay. They did the same thing with the Owens system that came over from England to create utopia in the United States. And even Henry Ford did the same thing with his Ford family foundation. All of his workers had to basically go to him. He would come into their homes if there was even disputes with the workers to settle the affairs. They believed they were high knights, you see, and had the right to rule the lesser in a beneficial way.
I have two more things, then I want to actually help you. David Ogilvy of Ogilvy and Mather. Do you know anything about him?
I know the Ogilvys in Britain, yeah.
He wrote books on advertising, and I'm in the advertising business, which is actually listening to you for the last 2 months. I've been listening to your podcast so often that I've actually haven't been begging for sex as often to my wife. That's probably a good thing for her. But in all seriousness, he predicted 13 changes in his book. On page 217, anyone in the advertising business can see this. And prediction number 7 is, advertising will play a part in bringing the population explosion under control.
Yeah.
And so is he one of the propagandists then?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
And loose change. If I were to, I'm always trying to wake people up. Is Loose Change a movie that I should wake people up with, or is that a distraction?
I have to say that I haven't even seen it.
Really?
I haven't seen it, no.
Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the movies that came along the scenes and woke a lot of people up to 9/11 Truth. All right, so now here's my proposition. I've heard you say in several of your podcasts that you know of a handful of people who have donated to your cause to help you out. I would like to add to that. How do I go about sending you want an international money order. Maybe you might want to explain that to people who don't know what that's all about.
Well, if they're in the U.S., they have two options. They can either send a personal check or an international postal money order you get from your post office. It has to be international to get cashed in Canada, but a personal check will be cashed all right in Canada without a problem from the U.S.
Now, here's the key. You said that you get some of your mail opened, and you said you can only count on a handful of people. You actually know the people who have donated to you. How do we know that? How do you know that money being sent to you isn't being stolen to further quash your speech?
Well, most of the ones who send it will email me that it's on its way.
So you do respond to email then?
Yeah.
Okay. My final question is, what would put a smile on your face?
A smile on my face?
What can we do that will put, because let's face it, you're depressing, Alan. I mean, I listen to you religiously, and I don't want you to be depressed.
Yeah.
What can I do, and what can people listening do to put a smile on your face? What would be utopia for you?
Well, the only utopia is to rather than go the way we're supposed to go by the way we're guided, or by opposing them in the way they expect us and actually predict that we shall oppose them, we have to find another way out of this, and we have to start being humane to each other. For a change, we become so selfish and cut off from each other, we have lost what we called society. And when we lose society, we lose everything. Once people start to change this, turn off that television set and communicate with each other, and really communicate, then believe you me, the agenda will be in trouble very quickly.
So this is a doable thing. I mean, it doesn't take someone. You see, I think when people say protesting and screaming into a bullhorn and all the other radio show hosts we know about, that's really BS, quite frankly. All we have to do is wake the people up. I mean, in football, if we all know that the blitz is coming, if the quarterback knows there's a blitz, he's not going to run the blitz, right?
Yep.
So that's all it really, my mom always says, she's not with me on this one. My dad's starting to come on the side. She's like, well, what can we do about it? I said, well, I think we need to talk about it. We need to let people know that if they're saying that vaccines are good for us and we reject that, then they won't do this to us. Is it as simple as that?
I think it's too, we must spend time with the younger ones, because most people today are so caught up and being busy and running around, they ignore the youth, and the youth are getting all of the reality, what they think is reality, from television and school, and they're cut off. They have no bonding. We've got to get through to them to give them that will, to start that will off, because they're going to get the brunt of the changes, and we cannot leave that to them.
So is turning off the TV probably the biggest step people can take?
Absolutely. All the big boys said back in the 1950s that television would be the main indoctrinational instrument that would be used, and that's why they imported millions of them into Britain. The government imported millions of them, refurbished television sets from DER company, which is read backwards, of course, and they made sure that everyone could afford it. In Britain, these cheap television sets. China has done the same. They wanted the whole nation to have a television set by 2005, in fact. So it's very important for them to have the propaganda instrument right there in the home. And it's also the main agent for the destruction of the family. If a man is sitting looking at young nubile dancers every night of the week, he's going to start to lose interest in his wife, and vice versa. The women are looking at the soaps all day long and looks at old Harry over there with his working hands, and it becomes less appealing. This is meant to destroy. It's also meant to condition the youth into looking for the powerful, because youth who have no contact with any authority will actually try and seek or crave authority, and they take those who are most powerful. What they're being seen, what they see today as powerful, are the soldiers, the guys in black uniforms with machine guns. We have to break the cycle before it's too late.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Let's call a spade a spade. Women get romance novels as their porn also, correct?
Yeah, they do.
And is that delivered to us by the big boys also?
Absolutely. In fact, if you go to any used bookstore, they'll tell you, even if they have collections of collectors' books, their biggest turnover, the thing that keeps them all going, are recycled so-called romance stories. And sure enough, I had no idea until some people pointed out to me these romance stories are just completely having sex with one stranger after another.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go to like Goodwill or used, one of them type places, and it's mind-blowing how many romance novels are there. I'll let you run, but I still didn't really get the full answer on what would put a smile on your face. If I were to send you, and the people listening to this were to send you $50 or $100 or $500, obviously, or maybe not obviously with you, I have a hard time telling, would $500 put a huge smile on your face, or is that too much or too little? Or
I would certainly put a smile on my face because... Yeah, that way I could pay the insurance on my old truck.
Okay. So, I mean, if 5 people listening right now sent you $100, would you send you 5, that would put a smile on your face?
Absolutely, yeah.
Very good. Great talking to you.
What I'll do now is answer the first question, because I think you mentioned knighting.
Yeah.
Well, Elton John is part of the culture creation industry.
Yeah, please go into this, because my wife is almost there on the truth side, and this is going to devastate her, so go ahead.
Well, it's not really to devastate. I mean, the music is good, and he certainly is a fantastic pianist. However, the guy who writes the words is a different author who writes the actual words. Elton John simply adds the music to it. I'll answer it more fully after these messages. I'm Alan Watts, standing in for John Stadmiller, and I'll finish up on the last caller's question about the knighthoods. Well, the British Empire and all the Commonwealth countries, including Canada, gives out these orders, even to cartoonists and political cartoonists that play the game of illusion creation for the general public. And the culture creation industry being so important for directing the minds of the people, especially the young, what to wear, that's where you get your fashions shown, how to behave, how to dress, how to be aggressive or sentimental, all comes from culture creation. And people like Elton John were big up there in it too, and did very, very well in the music industry. He also promotes certain movements, and that was another part of it too, political movements, in fact, you might say. And that's part of the reason he got rewarded. However, there's also a scam involved that came out recently with Tony Blair, because he was handing out knighthoods to different musicians for about £40,000 contribution to his party. So there's also corruption at that level. It really doesn't mean so much. However, there are different orders of knighthoods. Once you get up into the order of the Garter, then you're really in the big time. You're on your way. You're joined at the hip, so to speak, with the people at the top. In fact, you could be allowed to breed amongst some of the aristocracy yourself and have aristocratic offspring. So the culture creation industry definitely is showered with these honors as having served part of the system. I at least look back at the rock and roll period, the real hard rock, and then heavy metal eras and so on, and the drugs that came in with it. The drugs were not made by people in basements. They were made by the big pharmaceutical companies on behalf of MI6 in Britain and dumped over walls at universities in sacks. That's how they got LSD off the ground. And they knew they could literally break the bond of a generation. That was one of their intentions. If they could break the bond of one generation between the old way of life and their parents and the new, while they indoctrinated them with the new culture, they could help end the family unit. That was the main reason for it. So music was terribly important to them, along with the drug industry that came out of it, heavily reinforced. And the BBC itself ran all the music stations at that time in Britain, including the television stations that promoted the new youth culture, free love and all this kind of stuff. It was all intentional. So as I say, every British Commonwealth country gets knighted. It's so interesting to see even Mayor Giuliani, after 9/11, went over and he got knighted by royalty for going into his basement, a concrete place where they had continuity of government, and fulfilling his role there. Kissinger got knighted, Papa Bush got knighted, so many of them go over to Britain and get knighted. And there's a key to this, because if you go into people like the Bronfman family, the family that came in from Russia, sat on a farm and bided their time while the railroads came through in the early 1920s, and then suddenly became multi-millionaires with the booze industry during Prohibition. Old Sam Bronfman, who could have bought and sold most people in the U.S., his dying wish was to be knighted by the Queen. And we can ask, why would he need this? Why was it so important to him to be knighted by the Queen? It was because the system that runs the legal above system also runs the illegal down below system. And they run both sides of it, and have all done through the ages. It's back to the laws of nature and the controlling of opposites once again. That's how you control whole civilizations down through the ages. You have a legal system and an illegal system, and you run both sides of the game. That's the control of nature. Sam Bronfman donated millions of dollars to the same charity that the Queen and the King donated to, in the hope he'd be noticed and asked over to be knighted. Now, today, I don't think they'd have any problem, but back in his day, it wouldn't be seemly, it wouldn't be terribly comely for royalty to knight a known gangster. It's interesting, too, that the Kennedy, old Joe Kennedy, who also was a partner in this whole game with the Bronfmans, and shipped stuff back and forth. When they stopped Prohibition in the U.S., they reversed the flow, because Canada got it brought in after the U.S. stopped it, and they reversed the flow of the booze back into Canada. And old Kennedy was a prime mover in all of this vast undertaking at the time. Well, he spent most of World War II in Buckingham Palace with the Queen. Great friends they were. And you have to ask, well, what's this relationship with the British royalty, with gangsters? It's a very interesting thing to go into, with lots of history behind it. And then you find that the top bands that brought in the drugs, they brought in the dysfunctional society, the breakup type of the family, even the free love, which came out with abortion, the whole industry that came from it, you find all of those big groups being knighted by royalty. And yet royalty supposedly was there to keep the old culture going, the old traditional ways. Well, we're finding out now, aren't we?